and welcome to The Art of Being Human. We've been doing a study, kind of a lengthy study as it turns out, of all of your family dynamics, everything from birth to death, all of the stages that you go through in your life and the challenges of each stage and how you can get across that. And I've also included other things like divorces, bullying, blended families, and things like that, because these are things that we run into every day, or a lot of people run into them every day. How to handle abuse, how to handle bullying, how to handle it if you're divorced. We've gone into adoption as well. So today we're going to start something on family dynamics. It's still a part of this study, and I'm going into normal families and dysfunctional families, because there are plenty of families that are dysfunctional that can use some extra help. So we're going to start off with normal families as well. To begin with, we'll do the normal families. So this is going to be quite traditional to begin with, but I want to end up, in terms of family dynamics, how to map a family, how to see how families interact with each other in case something goes wrong and you have to have some family counseling. How does a family counselor view your family? How do they know the interactions outside of your telling them? Is there any way that they can kind of map it out so they can understand it better, which is important in the counseling process? And of course there is a way, and I will be showing you that as well. So let's take a look at normal family dynamics. Most of us, now I realize that this is getting less and less true with time because of the way society is, but most of us have grown up in a traditional family. Now, what's a traditional family? It's the mother and the father and the children. That's the immediate family. Now, there may be an aunt or an uncle or a grandmother or a grandfather that's in the mix, or maybe an uncle is staying with the family, so it may include more people, but the basics is the mother and the father and the children. Sometimes the mother's not available, or there's been an accident, or there's been a divorce, and so we have maybe an aunt taking care of the children, or maybe a grandparent raising the children because the parents aren't available for some reason, or one parent isn't available for some reason. But for a true traditional family, you'll have the mother, the father, the children, and other people as they come and go. Mom and dad or other caregivers. You've got to remember, brothers and sisters, grandparents, uncles, aunts, and cousins can all be in the mix. Now, in a normal family, most people have fairly good mental health, so they interact with each other in a healthy way. And if they're interacting with themselves in a healthy way, then they learn to trust one another. And if they trust one another, when problems come, they work on the problems, they get a resolution of the problems, they decide what they're going to do and how they're going to resolve the problems, and life goes on. And it's not such a big deal, because families go through this kind of thing all the time. So most people will get their emotional support and help from other family members, other relatives, or their ministers, their priests, people who are involved with them in a spiritual way, because they do have that as a support system as well. This is all perfectly normal. This is all perfectly healthy. Now, it doesn't mean that they won't have problems, but their way of looking at problems is, we're a family, we're together, we solve these things together, and we stay together, and we support one another no matter what comes up. This is perfectly healthy. This is perfectly normal, and this is the way that it should go. This is where we learn trust. Trust is really important. We have to learn trust. If a child is ill, the parents take care of the child, so they learn to trust the child. The child learns to trust the parent. And so therefore, this is the whole basis of learning trust. Trust is a big issue. And if families are healthy, the children learn to trust their parents, and family members learn to trust each other. And when things come up, they just take care of it themselves. Now, as I said before, trust is a big issue, and families that get into trouble will be in trouble if the trust is broken. See, I always could trust my parents. My parents would take care of me. My parents would take me to a doctor if I needed it. My parents would take me to school if I needed it. I mean, and you just learn to trust that way. So trust is an issue. If the trust is broken, because somebody went to jail, somebody committed a crime, whatever it was, it becomes a big problem, because then if you don't have trust in each other, then who do you trust? If you don't have trust in each other, then where do you go to for help? How are you going to deal with somebody if you basically don't trust them to do the right thing? And when you have families where there's alcoholism involved, or there's gambling involved, or some kind of a dysfunctional thing, every family member gets affected by it. There's no such thing as a problem in a family that affects one person only. That usually isn't the case, because everybody else has to react to the problem that one member has. So supposing somebody got caught stealing, every member of the family is affected by that in some way. Now, it doesn't mean every member is guilty. It doesn't mean every member shares some kind of a guilt or some kind of a problem, but they all have to react to where the problem is. So trust has to be learned, and trust is earned. Now, we hear that statement all the time. You have to earn your trust. In other words, people aren't going to trust you just because you say you're trustworthy. You have to prove to them that you're trustworthy. Well, in a healthy family, that's been going on since the child was born. The child learned to trust their parents because they were always there for them when they needed them, or another caregiver would be there for them when they needed them. So trust was not an issue. But when the trust is broken, it's very hard to repair trust. So trust is both earned by people. You learn to trust those that you can. And then trust is actually an experience as well. It's also learned and it's also earned. I learned trust because my parents were trustworthy. I learned what I live. And you hear people say that. You learn what you live. If you live in an environment which is healthy, basically healthy, I'm not saying problem-free, because nobody's problem-free, but if you live in a family where trust is a good thing and you learn to trust each other and you support one another, you can go through a lot of things and you can come out of it on the other side and you can still be a good, healthy family. If the trust is broken, it's very hard to repair it. If a parent promises their child, say in a divorce situation, I'll come to your games, and then they never show up, what is the child learning? They're learning the fact that their parent, or whoever made the promise to come to their game, isn't trustworthy, and they can't trust them. If you can't trust them in a little thing like, I'll show up for your game, how are you going to trust them for big things, like I'll help you go through college, or I'll help you earn your way through college, or something like that? Or I'll help you when you buy your first house. You can't trust people if they aren't trustworthy, and a child can pick up on that relatively easily, and they learn fairly early who's trustworthy and who's not, and who's abusive and who's not. Who can they go to for help if they need to? It might be grandmother. It may not be the parents. Families get fractured, and when families get fractured, it's kind of a bad thing. So children learn that they can trust their parents because the parents are trustworthy in a normal family. But sometimes the parents need to go in for counseling because there is a problem: alcoholism, gambling, illness, and it fractures the family somewhat, and they need to get extra help to cope with it. It doesn't mean they stop being a worthy family. It just means that sometimes extra help is necessary, and if extra help is necessary, you should get it. You know, I've had counseled families in which the children were kind of getting off base. They were kind of doing things that weren't right. The parents weren't doing things that were right. And you could see that what was a good family is starting to get fractured. It's starting to change. That there is distrust where there was trust before. And so you need to have a family get together. They need to be counseled. They need to put their pieces back together. If they're fractured, put their pieces back together. And so therefore they can become a normal family again. You know, children can always sense discord in a family. You don't necessarily have to talk to them about it. In fact, it's not a good idea to talk to them about it, because what a child will always do is they'll take responsibility for the discord. It must be my fault. I must have done something wrong. My father doesn't love my mother anymore. He wants a divorce. I did it. Now, why would a child feel that they're responsible? They are never responsible. There is a power thing going on between the parents. Sometimes they deliberately use the kids as pawns, and that is really a terrible thing to do because it destroys their mental health. It changes who they are. But at the same time, you see, if you keep your problems separate from the children, work on them, and the children don't have to be brought into a situation where they have no control, because they don't have any control, and then they can weather the storm. Don't bring your children into situations that they cannot control. They will always take the blame. And it doesn't take much. Why would a child take the blame? I think part of it is the fact that they look at the parents in a kind of an awe-inspired way. They look at the parents like, these are the problem solvers. These are the ones who take care of us. These are the ones who have the answers. And in a good, healthy relationship between parent and child, the child will feel that way. I trust my dad. He fixes my toys. He takes me to the doctor. He brings me to school. I trust my dad. So therefore, if something goes wrong between dad and mom, they couldn't have done it. It couldn't be their fault because they've got it all together. They know about life. They can help me. They take care of me. So therefore, it's not them that's at fault. So who else is available to take the blame? It's me. It's the child. I must have done something wrong. If I were a better child, if I didn't have this health problem, if this didn't happen or that didn't happen, it must be my fault. And they will make themselves responsible, and they'll make themselves the fault, the person who's to blame. Now, unfortunately, in some families, that's very handy for the parents to say, in a sense, although they may not say it directly, yeah, it is your fault. You know, you've had cancer, we've been to the hospital umpteen times for your treatment, so our family is falling apart with financial problems, and who's the child going to blame? Of course, he's going to blame himself. But a child is never responsible. They can't be. They're not old enough. Their brain isn't developed enough, and it's just not their fault. So half my time in dealing with children is to let them know that they're not to blame for family discord. Now, we're going to get into family discord in a minute. I want to really focus right now on normal families. On normal families, you don't have to discuss every problem in front of them, but you do solve your problems. Now, I want to show you when a family is in distress, or if you want to understand family dynamics, how do family members relate to each other? Because it's like a whole subsystem of society, the family is. Then sometimes a psychologist will map the family. When I say map it, they actually use symbols and draw out the placement of the family, where the family is, how they relate to one another, and they use a mapping system that's called a genogram. They're kind of fun to do. They can be quite complicated, but I want to show you just kind of an example of how the family can get mapped and how this is helpful to a therapist in order to understand family dynamics. So I've got a couple of charts here. These are the symbols that would be used if in a family, in a mapping situation. This isn't the map itself, but these are some of the symbols that would be used. Okay, so a circle is going to represent the female. The male is going to be a square. And then you have a series of arrows. When you have an arrow back and forth like that, that's a good, healthy relationship. And if I put an arrow like this, the mother and the father, say the female's the mother, the male is the father, if I put arrows here, then of course what would happen, it would show a good healthy relationship between the man and his wife. Now, an arrow that's kind of broken, this arrow is broken. There's short lines, but there's a space between the lines. This is a broken relationship. The relationship is there, but it's damaged. When you have an X, that means deceased. The male is deceased or the female is deceased, so therefore they're kind of X'd out. And when you're drawing children, you could have a female child and a male child. I just make them smaller. I make the circle and the squares smaller. So those are the basic symbols. Now there are more, but I'm only doing the basic things so you can understand it. So I'm going to go to the next chart. This would be, and this is just, I made this up in my head. It's not an actual family, but it could be because a lot of families would be like this. So this would be the map. Now remember, you also have cousins, ex-husbands and wives, adoptive children, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and so you have a lot more people than what I have shown you on this, but I just want to give you an idea of what it is. So if I want to map out a family, I'm not going to do it secretly. I'm going to do it with the family itself. I'm going to do it with somebody there with me so they can see what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Or if I do it by myself, I'm going to show it to them so they see the end results and they can make corrections and say, no, this isn't right or this isn't right. And the importance of having people see it is they start to understand the family dynamics because they can see what those arrows mean and what these squares and symbols mean. And it gives kind of a symbolic picture of the family. So let's get back to this chart. So I'm starting off here with the mother and the father. The female figure, I wrote mom here and dad there. They have a good, healthy relationship with each other. How do I know? It's the arrows. This arrow, dad to mom, mom to dad. Now, if the relationship of the dad was the dad loved the mom, but the mom wasn't sure, then I could have the arrow this way as it is, but the mom, it might be a broken arrow because maybe she's the one who wants to get the divorce or something, but I didn't do that. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with these. So mother and father. Now there are children, 2 children, the female child, a little girl, and the male child, a boy. And they have a good relationship with their parents as shown by the straight lines. I've just put double straight lines. So therefore, this is a good, healthy relationship within the family. Now, if you look for other people in the family, you have your dad. This would be the father's dad, so that would be the grandfather. And then here would be the grandmother up here, if this is clear to you. And now the mom has a good relationship with the grandmother, probably the grandfather too, but I just didn't draw that in. The father has a good relationship with his parents. And then the mom has a grandmother, a mother, so she's the grandmother. And then the grandfather died. So therefore, he's X'd out. So the mother's mother is alive, the grandmother is alive, but her father, the grandfather, is not alive. He has deceased. And so there's a broken relationship between, because he doesn't exist, so there's broken relationship. The grandmother has no relationship now with the deceased husband, and the mom has no relationship with him either because, of course, he's deceased. But you see, I've got that all charted out. Now, you've got uncles. The mother has a brother, and so therefore he's going to be the uncle to these children, and the uncle has a wife. Probably a second wife, because this first wife, I would assume it's a first wife, is X'd out. She is out of the picture. You know, there's a bad relationship there. I just put a small X there. She may be deceased. If I cross the whole thing out. She definitely would be deceased, but at any rate, there's a poorer relationship there, but I would assume this is a second wife who he has a good relationship. And they have a good relationship with the little boy and the little girl. And so if I wanted to make it really complicated, I could have added cousins, maybe an ex-husband and wife, maybe an adoptive child or 2 or more adoptive children. I just want to get you a chance to see how this all plays out. Now, if you're doing this with a family, you can make it kind of a game. You can make it kind of fun. And the thing is, when they look at it, they see a picture of the whole family, and it becomes clear what some of the interactions are. You know, as it's more complicated and you have more interactions, you can see what the reactions are. Now remember, these people, to us, they're just squares and circles, they're just symbols. But to the family that's looking at them, they represent real people. And they can look at it and say, oh yeah, I didn't realize that now, but, and they come to conclusions as to how these people are relating to each other. The counselor comes to a conclusion as to how they're relating to each other. And it can give a good picture. Now, I decided to do this because probably for some people watching this, they've never seen this before. This is something that's completely different to them. But for a person, if you're counseling a person, you want them to understand the dynamics of their own family. This is why I want to do it with people. You want them to understand the dynamics, and you need to understand the dynamics as a counselor in order to be the best counselor you can be. So you can ask questions. What's happening between the child, the boy and the girl? Do they get along with each other? Well, according to this, there's a good relationship between them. That's symbolic, but you can read that right there. What about the mom and dad? Do they argue a lot? No, evidently not. They have a good relationship. There are no broken arrows there. So you can make assumptions about family dynamics by looking at a map if it's a good one. And as I said, I just made this up out of the top of my head so you could get a chance to see what it's like. But it is a tool that can be used for families to understand one another and for the counselor also to understand the family. So I don't want to go too much farther than that. Remember that a normal family has problems like every other family, but they resolve them. And they resolve them in an attitude of trust because they learn to trust each other. And when they trust each other, they can resolve problems more easily. But if you have broken trust, and that's the key, if you have broken trust, it's hard to repair. When they start not to trust each other, then they'll become accusatory of each other. They'll start blaming one another. You did this, you did that, you had the affair, and et cetera, and then it just does not go well. But with family mapping, you can picture all of that out. You can get as complicated as it needs to be as long as you can understand the symbols and have a picture of that whole thing. And then you can say something, well, supposing there's a relationship here that's been broken. It's not an immediate family relationship, though, because this is probably an ex-wife to the uncle, but what if it was more in the family itself? What can we do to change this, to make this better? And if this is better, how are all the relationships here going to be changed by it? Because there's no such thing as something happening to one person that does not affect all of the other people. So you can't treat people in a vacuum. Sometimes, of course, you have to. If there's one person with a problem and they're psychotic or whatever it is, sometimes you have to treat a person like they're in the vacuum. But as soon as you can, you go out of the vacuum and you include other people in their relationships, and you get to understand what these people are like and what they're doing and how they're doing it and how you can make changes. It is really very fascinating when you get into it. I've always enjoyed doing it, and the people that I have, it's almost like a game to them. Help me to understand your family. We're going to kind of map it out, and you can see how they get a greater understanding of their own family dynamics, even as the counselor gets a better understanding of the family dynamics dynamics as well. So I'm going to close it here, and next time we're actually going to go into dysfunctional families and what they are like and what can be done to help them. So we'll close it for now. Please join me next time.